Hello, my name is Mark Taylor. Welcome to the Education on Fire podcast network. This show is sponsored by the National Association for Primary Education. Hello and welcome to the Education on Fire podcast. The place where we share creative and inspiring learning in our schools. Season 5, Episode 74. Hello and welcome back to the Education on Fire podcast with me, Mark Taylor. Thank you for joining us again during our PE and sports season, and today I'm delighted to be joined by John Parsons, who's from Create Development. Thanks, John, for joining us today.
My pleasure.
Can you give us a bit of information and background really about what is Create Development and what is your role within it?
Yeah, of course. Create Development is an organisation, I suppose, of like-minded people. We've been established 10 years, and we were set up by Ronnie Heath and myself 10 years ago, and it's really sort of grown in size now. We are UK based, but we do some stuff internationally, and we employ about 20 people directly, and then work with about 70, 80 partners across the country to really try and I suppose transform the culture of PE sport and activity in not just in schools, but really look at the experience that children get within schools, within the home, and also within the community. Our starting point is a belief that when children are very young, they all love physical activity, so they have an innate passion for movement, and really, because of the culture we now have and some of those experiences those children have, is that an awful lot of them will fall out of love with activity and choose not to be active. And we know that the power of activity and the impact it has in all outcomes is huge. So I think our vision really is about creating positive relationships with physical activity for life for every child.
I mean, that makes an awful lot of sense. And why PE in terms of your background? Why was it something that you wanted to create in that area?
I think in terms of my background, we were all sort of from PE and sport backgrounds and education backgrounds and former teachers and trained teachers, and I think that has huge strengths, but it also sometimes has weaknesses in that we, on the whole, are very positive experiences. And I've come to realise over the years that really isn't the case for a lot of people. Their experiences were not good in PE and sport. I was told I was talented as a child at sport. I really don't think I was. I think I was just lucky. I was lucky to be born into the family I was born in. I was lucky to be one of 7 children. I had siblings to play and be active with. I played out. I went to a primary school that really valued PE and sport, driven by one particular teacher. I had a dad that drove me around and gave me community opportunities. I went to community clubs where I had coaches that maybe weren't coaches in that they didn't have great technical or tactical knowledge, but that really were good with children and create a really positive environment. And because of all that, I can really get a sense of all the benefits that I've had through PE and sport, and think that every child deserves that opportunity, and it shouldn't really be down to luck. But actually, a lot of experiences aren't like that for an awful lot of children and young people. But when it is done well, when PE and sport is done well, we know it has hugely positive outcomes.
And so in terms of schools, and like I say, I mean, obviously having this big reach and the opportunities, the key thing, how is it that Create Development actually then is able to support schools and teachers in terms of getting that opportunity to as many people as possible?
Yeah, so we work in partnerships. So we will work in a specific area and find out who really are the people working with the schools in those areas. So it could be former school sports partnerships or county sports partnerships or local authorities or charities or other organisations. We work alongside those organisations who share a similar vision and passion and similar values, and really then look to work with schools. We don't really sell stuff off the shelf because we think there's a real change in culture that's needed around how PE and sport is delivered, not necessarily what we're doing, but how it's done. So we work alongside schools, work alongside teachers and train and support them to really look at why they do PE. What is it that they want their children to learn? What's the most important stuff for their kids to be successful? And how are we going to deliver it in a way that's going to be far more inclusive and engaging for all their children, and really provide them with not just with training, but a whole menu of ideas and support. And I think with most of our work is with primary schools, really recognising some of the challenges they face in terms of their time and capacity, and having that empathy really.
And how does the sort of the real learning platform that you have on your website, how does that fit in with what sounds like a very sort of hands-on and sort of personalised way of learning?
Yeah, so the platform's called Jasmine. We wanted to give it a child's name. We didn't want to talk about PE first or sport. We wanted to talk about children and a particular child, and it's deliberately a girl because we know that activity levels in girls is worse than boys. But we really wanted to talk about a child first, and really Jasmine is alongside the training really gives supports the training and gives the teachers a menu of ideas and to support the approach and philosophy that we go through with them on the training. Teachers are time poor, particularly primary schools. Now we can't tell them what to do with their children. We don't know their children. So it really gives them a framework and a basis upon which to really personalise and adapt to meet the needs of their children.
What I really like about that is like you say, knowing the story of your children and knowing who they are means that you have that relationship in order to do that, which as a teacher is absolutely the best way. So, I mean, it really sounds like you're empowering the teachers and giving them that support to grow in knowledge and, I guess, therefore confidence in delivering PE to them.
Absolutely, and I think we Real PE, a program that we deliver, we started 5 years ago, and we ask a question on the course to find out a lot about the teachers and how they feel about PE and sport. And I think sometimes we sort of live in these echo chambers where we surround ourselves by similar people who think that PE and sport automatically is fantastic and has all these positive outcomes. And really, when we spoke to a lot of teachers, I'd say far more than 50% said that they didn't find PE and sport did that for them. I think the top two words that came out were embarrassing and humiliated. So there's a huge task really to really empower a lot of those teachers to say that, well, like, you had poor experiences, but that's because it was poor PE and sport, and it doesn't have to be delivered like that. And really, make sure that your children don't have the experiences you had.
How does your vision of that change that sort of teacher's philosophy or understanding of what they experienced when they were younger?
Well, I think what sometimes has happened I think there's always, and we know this, there's always been fantastic PE and sport and PE teachers, and it's always been around. We didn't invent any of this stuff, so we don't claim to have. I think, but what we believe is that sometimes we've put the sport or the activity first. So the belief is that I need to be a sport expert to really, and that's the most important thing. So I need to know all the techniques and tactics and rules for different sports, whereas actually for a primary teacher, far more important, for anyone working with children, far more important is really understanding children and child development, and they are the experts at that. So once we get around that and really talk about, well, really the most important stuff isn't that they can play a forehand in tennis or do a forward roll. The most important stuff is that we build children's confidence and their resilience, and they can communicate and problem solve and be creative and explore. And I think and that's what they do, that's what they're good at, primary teachers. We'll help them with some subject knowledge. But what we do is we say, all the stuff you're really good at, that's what PE's about. And if we can teach it in that way. And I think maybe some teachers in the past have thought that isn't what PE is, or certainly not how it was delivered for them.
And so going forward, and you said you've been working in partnerships and that kind of thing, how does the actual sort of contact with you actually look for a teacher in a school? Is it a question of going and doing some CPD? Is it a question of you sort of infiltrating, like you say, a local authority to do it and then filter out? So what's sort of the actual contact that a teacher will experience? Yeah,
so we have different levels. I mean, we launched a program this year called Real Legacy, which is really trying to provide a 2-year program support with some additional sort of school-based support to really work alongside the subject leader and the senior leadership in the school to really look at the culture of PE and sport in the school and their vision and ambition for it. And I think without that real ambition to change that culture, it is tough. What we tend to do is we will work, and it's about getting the balance right between what's realistic and what you'd love to do. I mean, you'd love to work with teachers for weeks and weeks and weeks, and there's all sorts of stuff you could do, but it's not realistic. So what we do is we tend to work with a nominated teacher in the school, or for Real PE, for example, for 3 days over the year, so they get to go and apply the philosophy and approach back in the school, come back, we build on that knowledge, look at some of the stuff they're struggling with, some of the experiences they've had, and share practice among the group. and then go away again, apply those things, and come back again. So we look to really sort of get a deeper knowledge and understanding with certain members of staff within the school, and then we really then look to potentially go in and then work with all the staff as a minimum for a day to really start to really kind of empower them and give them that confidence. And then because we run several programs, but they're all based on the same philosophy and approach. So although we might be working with them around their gym program or looking at how they develop play within their early years and foundation stage and key stage 1 children, and working alongside the parents, the philosophy really never changes. So we help to embed that philosophy and understanding through working with those schools over a period of time.
And what's the kind of feedback you've got from the teachers that have taken part in terms of their confidence and I guess their overall understanding, like you say, as an approach, which is obviously the key thing to get across?
I think the teachers, the feedback consistently is the teachers love the approach because it's what they know is and what they understand around children and child development. So actually, what we're doing is we're saying, well, the stuff that you do really well, that's really what we should be doing in PE and sport. It's going to look a little bit different, obviously, because the environment's different, but it's the same principles that you apply within the classroom. So things like a real clear sense of what the children are learning and why they're doing it, and making sure every child experiences early success, but then every child needs to be stretched and challenged, but they'll be different. Praising positive behaviours rather than just focusing on the most physically able and outcome and performance. Regular celebration of view and progress. Collaborative learning within every lesson, and really a shift of control. So the children, we're empowering the children, giving them that sense of choice and ownership. So all the stuff that they really understand is around good teaching and learning, which is say, well, that's what PE should be like. Good PE should be like, and that is achievable. So the feedback we get around the philosophy and the approach is great. I think they love they want lots of ideas and activities. I think where we've fallen down in the past a little bit is really what would that look like in a curriculum? What would that look like over a year? We've attempted in the past to really sort of map that out and say, here's what it might look like. But I think with the digital platform, Jasmine, I think really for the first time ever, we feel really confident that actually we can do this in a way that's quite simple for them as well. So we can really support them to get their head around in a far more simple way. But in a way that will allow them to build their confidence and then really start to personalise that, and as they do with any curriculum and scheme of work, to really make it fit the needs of their children.
And I guess often the case is getting out of their comfort zone, isn't it? And I think once you can sort of join all the dots up, it then really helps. So like you were saying, when you can empower them to the fact they understand how to teach and that they're the best people to be able to do that, then already they're in a position to think, right, I've got this, I understand this. And then, like I say, when they can see the overall idea of maybe curriculum ideas or a year's plan of things, I guess if you were going to relate that to maths, you would know that you were going to start by doing your 2 times table, or you then might go to the 5s and 10s, or however you wanted to develop it. I guess that's the same with sport. Once you have an idea of where you'd like this journey to go, then you're much able to actually just make those adjustments and actually put those things in place.
Absolutely, and I think what we try to do is really show within the school what a progressive curriculum might look like. So, and I think what's happened in the past is because we've been very activity or sport led, and we've put the sport ahead of the children, we're expecting some children who've had very limited experience and opportunities to do really quite complex things and really set them up for failure. Whereas in line with the new curriculum, really looking at children from early years, really looking at building their fundamental skills, but doing it through through play and through themes and songs and stories and movement and adventures. And then really building from there, so we can really get a sense that there's a consistent approach throughout the school, and we can really get a sense that the children are progressing in the things that are most important, which isn't just their physical skills, it's their personal skills and social skills and emotional development and their creativity. And I think sometimes there hasn't necessarily been that coherent progressive curriculum. But I think we don't help teachers. If you look at primary teachers, one of 10, 11 subjects they might teach, we've thrown different terms and 4 strands of the curriculum, 6 areas, 8 levels, 10 high quality outcomes. There were 2 models of APP. There was classroom quality standards. Gifted and talented was a different model, and then we talk about multi skills, and then it's physical literacy, and then one course will talk about fundamental skills as agility, balance, coordination. Another course will tell them it's stability, object control, locomotion. Now it's physical literacy, and other people talk about physical fluency. And then secondary schools, they do key concepts and processes, personal learning, thinking skills. So we bombard teachers with different models sometimes within one of many subjects they're teaching. And I think really what we try and do is, because we've been there, I think we really have that empathy and say, well, actually, if you look at a lot of those things, they're all correct, but they're all kind of saying the same types of things. That really there are certain things for children that are just really important. Some things are more important than others around how they feel about themselves, how they work with others, their thinking skills and creativity, and really putting that into something that's quite progressive and logical and really simplifying it for teachers. Not dumbing it down in any way. That's why it's not an off-the-shelf product. It's something they're going to have to plan and think about, but really having the empathy to understand that, they are time poor. They're teaching 10, 11 subjects. And sometimes we bombard them with different models and things. And we've tried to do the opposite, really kind of simplify things, but align it around things they're really confident with.
And as you say, time poor and that kind of thing. I mean, what are, as well as obviously time, what are some of the other struggles you think that they really come up against? I guess one of them is going to be space and actually just the facilities that they actually need to get some of these things in place.
Yeah, I think space is a big one, and I think we work all around the country. I mean, I've been in 3 schools in the last week, and they are hugely different in terms of. I was in one school where huge amounts of indoor and outdoor space, and then another school which was a tiny little, maybe 15 by 15 hall. And it's really then getting support the teachers to understand that when you work with the primary children, it's you're not driven by the activity of the sport, which have set rules and dimensions and stuff, and governing bodies have moved away from that. It's really understanding that the child comes first, and we can adapt and be flexible with that stuff. I think the big one for me is leadership within the school is huge. I think you can get a sense very quickly as to where PE sport and activity is as a priority within the school quite quickly, and if it is a huge priority, and whenever we talk internally about when you're doing a course, if there's someone from senior leadership, ideally the head teacher on the course, you get a real sense that it's going to be a really good day because the school are really buying into the importance of PE sport and activity. I think if there isn't that ambition and belief, and you can understand why there might not be, because for a lot of people, as I said, they had quite poor experiences in PE sport and didn't necessarily haven't had the experiences that will lead them to believe that it can have this whole school impact. So I think so the leadership at the school is really essential in supporting particularly the subject leader to really put it at the heart of the school, really.
And if there's teachers listening who are thinking, I wish my head or my senior leadership team were as supportive as I'd like them to be, but maybe they're not, what advice would you maybe give them to try and just sort of, I don't know, just sort of try and sort of just push the needle a little bit further in terms of actually giving them an option or a way in to kind of maybe just make it a little bit more of a priority for the sake of the children?
It's a $1 million question, really, and it's not easy. I think people resist change, and if people have an opinion around something, it's quite difficult to change that opinion. I think as a sector, we have to do much better at proving the impact we have. There's been a huge amount of investment and finance into PE sport over the last 15, 20 years, and I think we're still not doing enough to really evidence and prove the impact it can have. I think in terms of within that school, I think really if we can start to really talk about how PE sport can have a positive impact on not just children's physical skills. So we'll work in schools where they want to talk about the activity, what they're doing first, and their curriculums around the activities. Whereas what we really try and do is talk about what the children are learning, what we want the children to learn through those activities. And actually, we don't really talk hugely around sport-specific stuff. We talk about children's resilience and perseverance and confidence and self-esteem. And I think we can start to make that case. And it always links to the vision and values of the school. It's remarkable when we go in and work with the school and talk about these, the curriculum we're looking at, these key skills. It always aligns very closely to the vision and values of the school. And then if we can really get them to buy into the fact that this isn't about making a child better at basketball, that might be an outcome eventually, but really it's about every child developing their confidence and how they feel about themselves and being able to communicate and cooperate. And if we can do it in that way, the best feedback we get from schools is really the impact it has, not just in terms of their passion for activity, but it has positive impact outside of PE across the curriculum, in the classroom, using it to develop children's confidence, behaviour, all sorts of stuff.
And you said just before there that you've been in sort of 3 schools recently, and so
Yeah.
like you said, you've got a team of people working within the organisation. Do they all do the same sort of thing, or is there a bit more structure to that in terms of who experiences what and actually makes the company sort of progress?
Yeah, so I think we're kind of like any sort of small company that's grown, is that you end up kind of doing what needs to be done a little bit. My role now is sort of director of innovation, so it sounds fancy. I think it was my colleague gave it to me because he thought my mum would be proud of me if I had that job title. But I think my role is to really try and unarm our staff with the best stuff to go out and really support schools. But we have tutors, we have regional staff that go and work in and build partnerships and relationships. We have marketing teams, we have design team. We do have different staff that do different things. We have staff that will go in and do specific school-based support. So really work alongside teachers, role modelling lessons, team teaching, observation and review. And it's a very different skill set to standing up and working, delivering to a group of teachers as it is to going and working alongside a member of staff and really building their confidence. So we're still ironing that out, I think, and really identifying what those roles are and what the kind of skills and attributes you need for those roles. But we're starting to really kind of identify who fits where and really provide the necessary support to do that. We commit a lot to staff development. We had 40 tutors together last week in Leicestershire, really spending a whole day with them. We do a lot of tutor training and staff training, which you'd hope we would do because we're an education company. But sometimes, companies in education don't always invest in their staff. We really try to do that.
And we've talked quite a lot about teachers and schools specifically and how they relate with you. Is there anything that you do where you can sort of cluster schools and events and that kind of thing where schools in local areas can actually get together?
Yeah, we do. We run sort of what we call learning communities where staff from different schools. I mean, I talked earlier about the idea of sort of the 3-day training. That tends to be teachers from different schools coming together because we love that sharing of practice. A lot of the best ideas don't come from us. It's from a school that's taken the philosophy and applied it, and we learn as much from them as they learn from us. But we run clusters, obviously with academisation and federations. Schools come together in that way. Conferences. We've identified certain what we call create learning schools, so really kind of hub schools that have really started to embed the philosophy. So we've done that where those schools then invite local schools in the area to come and say, well, I know you've been on the training and the philosophy and you really like it. Come and see how we've applied it within our school. So we've identified some schools and we're looking to do more of that over the coming sort of 1 or 2 years.
I mean, certainly that it's almost sort of peer to peer, isn't it? Learning, which
absolutely
we know from children, is often the best way of learning it, because a lot of the struggles and the things that people come up against actually can be demystified quite easily because you're sort of talking the same language with the same sorts of experience. Can you talk a little bit about the PE and sport premium and how that's really affecting everybody at the moment?
I mean, it's in terms of us, it's been huge. I won't lie. Most of the work we deliver, not all of it, but most of the work we deliver would come through the PE and Sport Premium. I think it's a mixed bag. I think in some ways it's been spent very well. I think the bit that we have to start doing better as a sector is we have to start evidencing the impact it's having. I think there's a lot of talk around what we spent it on. And the next question would be, so what? What impact has it had? And some of the stuff that we're trying to do with schools now is really support them to look at impact around things like teacher confidence, pupil enjoyment, pupil progress, broader whole school impact. Because I think unless we do that, we've got huge opportunity. If we don't really start to prove that this money's making an impact, I think we're going to miss a real trick. But it is. It's probably the best funded subject in the school at the moment, PE and sport. So it is giving opportunities certainly for us and for schools to really invest in things that they wouldn't invest in otherwise because they just wouldn't have the money.
And I think for me, I mean, my our youngest daughter's just literally finished year 6 and gone into year 7 this week, and I think that sort of vision of what PE in sport is in a primary school is a really interesting one, from what happens in the actual PE lessons to the expectation that you're then going to have a netball team or a football team and go and do various things, and what they're going to get out of those particular things, because you can see that there's money there, you can see there's extra opportunities there, but it's kind of linking all those things together that I thought was interesting, in terms of, it's great having a team to go and play football, but how much football training have you had up until that point, and actually it's feeling like there's some kind of cohesion between an overall skill set that you're learning, and then actually how you then apply that within specific sports or team games, I guess.
Yeah, and I think clearly there is a role for that. I think if we look at it from the other side of things, I think my background is football, is actually in terms of sport, was my sporting background, and all sorts of huge opportunities. I think what has possibly happened in the past is that PE has been delivered in a way that really caters for those 20% that really are quite good at sport, have those previous opportunities. The 80% that haven't had those opportunities, don't feel like they can be successful, then sort of drop out, or don't develop that passion and love for sport. I think it does sometimes concern me that sometimes with some of the schools we work with, really talking about what we're doing for the 80% of those children who traditionally don't enjoy PE and sport. And if we're building our curriculums around very sport-led, sport-focused, I'm not saying we shouldn't do sport. It's brilliant if it's taught in the right way, but sometimes it's taught in a way that really is great if you can do the sport, if that makes sense.
Yep.
But if you haven't got those skills, children are writing themselves off very early. And the interesting thing is that the kids that can do it are the ones that are doing loads and loads of activity anyway. They're at community clubs. They've got parents that are giving them huge opportunities. And that's great. And those children deserve to be stretched and challenged. But I think unless we start to engage the other 80% and get them physically active, and I think the world's changed. It's children. It's not just about those traditional sports anymore. Children are far more open to a whole range of different things. And certainly with the primary schools we work with, and I think if we're expecting those generalists to be sport-specific experts in sort of 20 different sports, I think we're setting ourselves up to fail a little bit. But if we can empower them to really build children that are physically literate, can move well, can run and throw and catch and jump and strike and do all those things, I think we're giving them the grounding and the building blocks to, when they do go to that coach, or if they go into that football club or that after school club, whatever it might be, we're giving them the tools and the confidence to then go and be able to access those sports. I think a lot of these skills are very transferable, but I think what happens at the moment, and I've seen it myself, working with children in year 4, 5, 6, they can't sidestep in both directions, they can't catch a ball. We're largely writing those kids off, and the sad thing is that sometimes it's not even picked up. If a child is falling behind in their literacy or numeracy, it's picked up very quickly. There's intervention, there's support. With activity, with physical literacy or physical activity, sometimes we're not even picking this stuff up. So I do get the point around preparing them for sport, but I think if you're a secondary school PE teacher, if you had a cohort of children that were all very physically literate and were confident and could problem solve, I think they'd much rather that than 10-20% of children that could access their curriculum, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you explained there really clearly, which I really loved, was is the fact that as a from a parent's point of view, for example, is that we often don't get that feedback. Because you get your school report at the end of the year, and you have parents' evening, and as you said, because of the literacy and that kind of thing, you get very much this is how they're doing in literacy, how they're doing in maths, how they're doing in science, and you get a little bit of the rest of it, but very little. And actually, as you say, with the money going into PE, which needs to be spent in order to actually give the children the skills they need in the way that we've been discussing today, actually, like you said, getting the evidence back to understand that, but I think also getting across what it is that we're trying to achieve within PE and sport, and getting that across to the parents and the people within the sort of the wider community of the school, I think would actually probably be even really great benefit for everybody, because then we're all on the same page in terms of knowing what we're trying to support our children with outside of school, as well as the teachers and the people within the school.
Absolutely, and I think one of the big pushes for us is really to look at, at the moment we're largely having to do it with the school because it's the best mechanism, but really looking at particularly in early years in Key Stage 1, because children will often form their opinions and how they feel about themselves by the age of sort of 7 years old. So really looking at how we can work alongside the school to really work with parents to say, well, can we play and be active with our kids again? Children have so much screen time and rewards now could be an hour on the iPad, whereas really can we support parents to say, well, here's some simple stuff we can start to do with our children at home, because children, when they're 4 and 5, all kids love activity. We've got to build on that innate love of activity, and I think we've got to start looking at not just the school but how we change culture in the home. Just to go back to the bit previous around the sport bit, I think if we can build these, if we have this logical progressive curriculum and approach, I think children will be ready for these things much earlier. I think what's happening at the moment is children are getting up sort of even top of Key Stage 2 and haven't got some of the most basic skills. Yet it's the equivalent of giving a child Shakespeare to read when they really haven't still learnt their sentences and words and letters. We think that through a far more kind of thoughtful, holistic approach, logical approach, children will get better at sport quicker. We don't think it's a compromise. We think it's a win-win, really.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense, and I love that analogy with the literacy, because everyone can understand that, and it makes a lot of sense. You wouldn't expect someone who can't read, write, or put a sentence together to do something that far ahead, and you're absolutely right. That is exactly what happens within the sort of the more PE sport area, isn't it? It's exactly that kind of. We haven't really.
Yeah, totally. And I think we put the sport first. We treat the kids the same. I've been in schools where there's a tennis lesson going on. Some of the kids can't get the ball over the net. They spend most of their time scrubbing around fetching the ball. I think back to my playing round at a school. I mean, I loved it because I could hit the ball and be successful and throw and catch. There were kids that never hit the ball, hardly ever. Yeah, but we treated everyone the same, so we put the sport, the activity ahead of the children, which I think can't happen. And then not within my school, but we see all sorts of awful stuff, like there used to be picking teams and stuff like that. I think if that's my child being picked last week in, week out, I really wouldn't be happy. And then using physical activities as a punishment, sending kids to do laps of the playground as a punishment, and so we've done some really, really daft things in PE sport. Games where the kids are knocked out, they have to sit on the side and watch the other kids play. So I think things have got better in terms of those types of things, but there are still people out there delivering PE, and that was their experience, and we have to tell them that isn't PE and sport. That was just quite poor practice.
And I really hope over the course of our chat today that we've really managed to get that across, because I think certainly over the interviews I've done during this season, that I've really sort of understood the difference, the idea of PE and sport and how they relate together, and the fact that they're not the same, and also, like you say, that idea of we have this sort of innate idea of what we think PE lessons are based on our own experience, and actually understanding that one, that isn't necessarily true, or it wasn't the best, or if it was a positive one, we're able to support others around us to understand that too. So thanks so much for chatting. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, and I think really enlightening for us. So can you share with us the best way for people to find out more about you and how they might be able to get in contact?
Yeah, they can, obviously, our website, we're just actually rebuilding it, particularly around the new Jasmine interactive digital platform we're building, so really kind of bringing that all together. But they can either go onto our website, www.createdevelopment.co.uk. They can follow us on Twitter, which I think is create_dev, DEV, with a capital C and a capital D. Or they can, via the website, they can email us, info@createdevelopment.co.uk. And with the digital platform, we're going to be able to do far more kind of, I suppose, communicate much better in terms of what this kind of looks like, and how we might support schools, coaches, organisations to really work with us. And we work in partnership. We're really open to those conversations with not just individual schools, but with organisations that work with schools.
It sounds like a very exciting time, and I like the fact there's all the progression, like you say, with the new things coming in as well, and I really encourage people to go and check out the website and be part of something which you can really start to sense the excitement and the energy there for really supporting children and making them more active and having a real cohesion over how PE and sport and school can really make a difference. So John, thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
No problem, it's been great, thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Education on Fire podcast. For more information of each episode and to get in touch, go to educationonfire.com. education is not the filling of a pail, but the lighting of a fire.